people come in.
Yep.
Will they hear us?
They will hear you. Oh, and people are coming in.
They are.
Yeah. So, welcome, everyone.
Hello, hello.
There's a Josh Halsey there too.
My goodness, he's out of the garden. Yes, look at the wall.
There's an original farm member, Connie Fox.
Aha.
So everybody's starting to come on in, and we'll wait a few moments and we'll start just around 5 o'clock. So welcome, everyone.
Oh, yeah. There's Carol Steinberg and Carol Ehlers.
So, thanks, everybody, for coming in. So Michael Halsey.
Hey, there's our good friend, Michael.
And Michael White.
Michael Light from California. He's in there somewhere.
Yeah, there he is. And Molly Channing. And Steve Jones, former chair of our board.
Nice.
And Marcia, who's vice chair of our board now. Yeah, you keep coming in. This is good.
So welcome, everyone, to our Peconic chat. We're just at 5 o'clock, and we just opened the Peconic chat up for the broadcast. So welcome, everybody, and it's so glad you're spending a little bit of time with us on a Saturday afternoon. I will just kick things off just really quickly. I'm Yvette Salcedo with the Land Trust, and I'm going to be our technical host for today. And Megan Chaskey has offered to lend a hand as well. So hopefully we'll, if you have any technical issues as you're coming in or issues, just send me a note in the chat, and if I can fix it, I definitely will. And want to thank you all for spending a little bit of time with us on a Saturday afternoon. We really appreciate you joining us as we celebrate Scott Chaskey today. And so again, if you have any technical questions, look at the chat, send me a note on the chat. I'll take a look for that. Also, we're going to open it up to questions and answers from the attendees later on. And so please use the Q&A button, which is at the bottom of the screen, to put in a question. You can put in a question at any time, and we'll try and answer that. The chat isn't disabled. It's just right now only me and John and Scott can see the questions in the chat to keep a little bit, just to, keep some focus in on the video today. So if you have a chat question, I am seeing it. So somebody has just asked about it, and so I'm watching. So any issues, just let me know. And before we get started, I'd just like to make a little reminder announcement. We're going to be doing another Zoom talk later this week on Thursday, June 11th, and that's going to be another part of our Long Island Grown series. And this one we're called it From the Sea. And so Laura Donnelly is joining us once again as the moderator, and our panelists are going to be Karen Rivara, Pete Haskell, and Ted Bucci. So we really hope you'll join us. It's at 6 o'clock on Thursday, June 11th. If you visit our website at peconiclandtrust.org, in the calendar, there's all the information on registering. So we hope to see you on Thursday, June 11th. And now we're about at 5:02. So I am going to turn it over to John and then Scott just for a quick welcome and greeting.
So thank you all. We of course, we're going to be at Quail Hill this day to have our Peconic and share and time together and break bread together. And given the unprecedented time that we are now living with a pandemic, and then of course most recently the tumult that we are experiencing, and all around caring for each other as all people, and that Black Lives Matter as well as all lives. And I'm happy that we're able to get together at least this way, understanding that next year, hopefully we'll be literally in a physical location together, and celebrating all that you have enabled us to do, and all that we hope to do in the future. And so with that, I'm going to turn things over to Scott to welcome you as well.
Oh, it's wonderful to see all these names, and more are coming. So it's a lovely thing. John and I are getting to be good Zoom buddies, so we'll be able to have a Zoom chat, and hopefully you can all join in. I only wish we were at Quail Hill. Of course, the opportunity that Zoom offers is that people who couldn't make it to Quail Hill can make it onto Zoom and be part of it. So it's a strange thing, but a wonderful part of it. I gave a reading through Canio's bookstore, and a friend from Cornwall in England was on it. And of course, that's the only way that he would have been part of that conversation. So we welcome you all. There's so many people I see who are very much a part of the farm, and have been, for some of them, including my mother-in-law, Connie Fox, for the entire 30 years of the farm. So what a wonderful thing to have you all here. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah. Oh, I can't hear you, Yvette. You're on mute.
I forgot I muted myself. So before we get into the conversation, we thought we would show a little bit of the beginning of Growing Farmers, which is a film that was made back in 2011, 2012, directed by Michael Halsey. So it's, just a little bit of it. So directed by Michael and produced by Michael and Hilary Leff. And just to, a little share on that, it did win the Audience Choice Award in 2012 at the Hamptons International Film Festival. But I'm gonna show a little bit, and then we'll start the conversation on the other side.
The premier factor of farming in the Hamptons really has to do with the long growing season and with the soil. Where else do you go in this country to find families who have lived and continuously farm the same land for over 300 years?
I came home in the 1980s from the West Coast visiting, and saw that the farm next door had a for sale sign on it. And I knew the family very well, called them up and asked them what had happened. And they explained to me that their parents had passed away, and that they had a huge federal inheritance tax. So a 10-generation farm was essentially sold to pay a tax on a farm, not based on what it was, but what it could be. Many, many houses.
So John, I think, yeah.
So yeah, well, that's a glimpse of us almost 10 years ago, not quite. And I think that, Scott, we've spent a lot of time working together, and I just want to sort of let things kick off with you, and give you an opportunity to say a few words. What do you really want to talk about? I'm just gonna leave it with you first of all.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank Michael, who's Michael Halsey, who is on with us, and that was such a great experience, the making of that film. And actually, Michael and I have carried on working together. There was a photo project that he did some years after that, and so the thing that is the sort of strongest in my mind and heart about what Quail Hill Farm has meant, and as a part of the land trust, is all of the people, all of the connections, so many different connections with so many different people, and many of them carrying on for decades. That's a really remarkable thing. And I know that, you know, for you, John, I can remember the first stories about how can we make a success of conserving land and what a land trust really means and what a land trust can be. And they all really focused on working with people and the friendships and the collaborations and all of that. And that's really what this work has been to me all these years. Yeah, that's a good place to begin.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's, you know, it certainly bears mentioning that this land was given to the community via the trust by Deborah Ann Light, who was a board member and longtime supporter thereafter of conservation and of the work that we do. And we're so happy to have Michael here with us on this call. Because it's really a legacy that Deborah has given to the community of a farm that began basically because of a management agreement we had with Deborah and an enterprising fellow prior to your arrival, Scott, who was looking for land to rent to continue the CSA that became a Quail Hill Farm.
Yeah, so maybe we should go back to that very beginning, you know, 33 years ago, actually, because the group of people who started the CSA that became Quail Hill, it started on some land in Bridgehampton, and there were 10 families who were involved with a biodynamic fruit grower named Hugh Williams. And all of the first community support agriculture farms in the country, it all started in the Northeast, were all involved in the biodynamic farming movement. Maybe we can get back to that too. Anyhow, one of those members is Connie and Bill. So Connie was married to Bill King, the sculptor, and Connie's a painter, and they were part of the 10 families, and here she is involved, you know, actually 33 years later, because after the first year, the farm, it was on private land. That landowner was a little anxious about people on his property, so it moved to Amagansett behind the church, the Lutheran church, and then that's when Bob brought the idea to you. And so it was the third year of the actual CSA, which makes Quail Hill Farm the first CSA in New York State, which is quite an amazing thing. And maybe later we'll talk about what's happened around the world with the community supported agriculture movement. And who would have guessed?
Who would have guessed? Well, and it's interesting because the farm started out when it arrived at Quail Hill as Promised Land Farm.
Right.
Because Deborah had promised the land to us by will, in her will, and she decided to give it to us long before. And once she gave it to us, well, it wasn't promised land anymore. It was time to change, and so it then reverted to its geographic name, Quail Hill. And it's been that ever since.
Yeah. So continuing on the early days, we had come back, Megan and I were living in England for the decade of the 80s. And when we came back, Bill King said, how'd you like to come over to this Saturday morning meeting of something called CSA that we're involved with? And I said, sure, yeah, I'll come along. And I did. And at that time, I had never heard of CSA, nor had many people. I'd never heard of a land trust. So when that connection came about, that was a fascinating beginning. And part of the sort of unfolding of the farm and how it became so much a part of the local community also had to do with those early trips that we made to land trust rallies and to, I remember an early trip down to Pennsylvania to meet Andy, who, and to visit some protected farmland there. And it was so exciting. The idea of the whole idea of protecting land and conserving land, and of actually organic growing on taking place on that land. It was just a wonderful, wonderful time, just full of sparks. That's my memory of it, really.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And it was a very unusual thing for a land trust to do. And actually, when Bob Willett first came to us, all he was interested in was renting land. We had just entered into the management agreement with Deborah. I called up Andy Johnson, who was a very early mentor to us in those early days. And he basically said, well, does he have a tractor? And I said, well, I suppose so. And is he supporting himself with the farm? I said, yeah. Well, then you should hire him. And so, as opposed to looking at it from a lease, it was really Andy who pushed us to understand what stewardship of land means. It's not just protecting it, it's also stewarding it, and what a wonderful way to draw the community into this land as a CSA. And so we ended up hiring Bob to do the CSA. So he was thrilled because all of a sudden he actually was able to get benefits for himself and his daughter. And but it blew his mind when we first told him, well, we'd like to hire you. He was completely blown away, but he took it on. So it evolved from there.
And then he took on the waves. Actually, we don't have to go into that, but I stayed because I didn't know how to surf, so I was content to work the land. And I'm thinking of the first, maybe it was my first introduction to a land trust rally, and it was in New Hampshire, and we were included on a panel discussion about business opportunities in land trusts. And I thought, do I have anything to say about that? It wasn't at all why I got involved with farming, but it was fascinating because it actually suggested something to the wider land trust community that really not many people had thought about. And then I gave a couple presentations. I remember you and I traveling to California and being there together. And that may be the first time that that I met Peter Forbes, who is on and listening. So hello, Peter. Hey, and that led to another very long friendship and a wonderful connection with the Center for Whole Communities in Vermont. So that's another reach of the work that we've been doing, and that still carries on at Knoll Farm in near Waitsville.
Do you want to touch a little bit on the movement, the CSA movement as well, just how rapidly it has expanded? And
well, from those first meetings in a little Waldorf school in Kimberton, Pennsylvania, the first, and it would have been 1991, something like that. The first gathering had maybe 25 or 30 people, and there were a few people from different parts of the country, although most people involved were from New England. That was sponsored by the Biodynamic Association, which was actually 2 people at that time. But those 2 people were very keen on the idea of CSA. The next year, there were 50 people. And then in came some grant money that had to do with a wonderful organization started by Kathy Lawrence in New York City called Just Food. And Just Food is still carrying on, 35 years later, or whatever. And that led to a series of 3 meetings, bringing in many more people. And the idea just spread from there. So then there were 400 people, and then there were 600 or whatever. Now there's an estimate there are something over 6,000 CSAs in this country. And there's an international organization called Urgency, based in France, that holds these international conferences every other year. And I've traveled to Portugal and to China and to Thessaloniki, Greece a couple of years ago. And in Thessaloniki, Megan and I were there together, and there were people attending from 40 different countries. And what a phenomenal thing. And so you would think, okay, what does CSA look like in Czechoslovakia? And what does it look like in Korea? And what does it look like in Brazil? And it looks quite similar to the model that we have. And and so many young people involved. So what an amazing trajectory. And the beginning of that meeting sort of, it's a wonderful story that the fellow who's the head of Urgency said, is there hope in China? And the China representatives, yes. Is there hope in Bulgaria? Yes. Is there hope in Togo? Yes. And that went on through 40 different countries. It was really an amazing experience. So I don't know, every time I would go away to, commune with other people practicing similar things, I would come back and be re-energized because of what we were doing locally. And that's what everyone else who was attending was doing as well. So, and I think there's some similarities with that, with people who are conserving land as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, do you have a little bit of an early poem, perhaps you might want to share with us?
What do you know? I just happen to have something here. So I thought I would go back and read a poem from the first year at Quail Hill Farm, and later I'll read a little prose piece from my last year there. So it spans 30 years. You're going to have to transport yourself, everyone, to a different season, but I hope that's okay. This is called Autumn, Quail Hill. At day's end on deep lane, sun descends into cool sand and clay. Opposite, a full moon whitens the cedars of Quail Hill. I am alone, and within a wind covered with silver and the deep orange. Alders brush and buoy up the mixed light. The stray cat haunts the grasses. Songbirds fall like shadows through the apples. I walk through the autumn order of trees, leaves given to grass, fruit set like stars on the canopy. A buck shines through the valley and breaks into beech woods. On the hill, over the hollies, I am midway between these lights of our sky. And as day and the season end, the wind I am now become as a sibilant beginning. I am the sound of the cedars, orange and whitening into night, to return on the shawl of morning. There's
Wow.
Quail Hill. There's a first look at Quail Hill 30 years ago.
Yeah. Well, we are so lucky to have not only your dedication to the farm itself and the people of the farm, the community of it, but also your prose, your poetry. So a poet farmer, it's an apt title for you, and it has been for you, as well of course as the director of Quail Hill Farm itself, the more formal title.
Yeah, well, I take my hat off to you, John, because not all organizations would allow poet farmer on the business card. Happily handed that out all these years.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. At the moment, the poet is the stronger part, because I'm spending a lot of time in my study now. So, and that's a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, your first book about this common ground, I think resonated with a lot of people. and in fact resonated with one of our successor colleague farms, the origins of which really come down to your book. You want to say anything about that?
Are we gonna run a little piece?
Yeah, we could. Yes,
Katie?
that's right.
Yeah. So Katie, here's Katie.
Oh, no sound.
Two young ladies.
Okay, I'm going to start it again. Sorry about that. I was muted.
It's probably a bit shocking that two young ladies not from here, never farmed before, are farming. After college, I worked in a foreign policy job and was ready to make a move and was looking to do something, create something, make something, and it turned into wanting to grow something. Somebody gifted me, in leaving that job, Scott Chaskey's book, This Common Ground. So I wrote him a letter and I said, I'd like to come learn how to farm. And he said, come on out.
Some ways it's a little romantic, but God bless them.
I just want to emphasize how important it is to answer the call for all those young people who just want to find a way into meaningful work. And one way of defining that is by working with the soil.
The Farms for the Future initiative is all about ensuring that the next generation of farmers, or new farmers, they're not always young, has a place to go, and that they have the ability to access affordable farmland for generations to come.
We don't have a tremendous amount of soil like this left on anywhere, and it should be used for farming whenever it can be.
Yeah, that's a great piece. And again, from the Growing Farmers film. Yeah, so that's how Katie and then Amanda came from Vermont, and they became friends during their year as apprentices. I mean, this is a great opportunity, just to talk about the apprenticeship program itself.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably, in the early years, maybe even for the first decade or more, I thought the main purpose of my work and the main mission really had to do with building the health of the soil and is involving as many people in that project. Then I came to realize that actually educating people and through the apprenticeship program was really pretty central to the work. And I don't know the exact number. We've never quite pinned it down, but it's over 150, maybe up to 170 apprentices over the years. And we checked into it a few years ago, and the record in the last 5 or 6 years was phenomenal. The percentage of people who were still involved actively in farming or in food issues and that sort of thing. So gosh, it's so hard to single any of them out because when I see that clip, there's so many stories in so at the end there was Bennett leading the song, I Hope Bennett is On. Bennett was an apprentice when he came to visit his great aunt at Sylvester Manor on Shelter Island. And he was a student at Middlebury College, and he kept coming over, and we were sort of mid-season saying, I really want to farm. I really want to farm with you guys. Finally, we said, okay, Bennett, here's a hoe. And he joined us, and we gave him a hoe to take back to Middlebury. And he started one of the first student-run gardens at Middlebury College. Then he got a great idea after he went and studied work songs around the world for a year on a Watson grant. And he came back and got the idea of starting a CSA at Sylvester Manor on Shelter Island. And wow, what a story that is, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and so many other people in that clip. Steve, who's now carried on, who was part of Quail Hill on and off over many years, and then farmed at Mary Ryan's, and now is farming with Liz, and they have 2 children together. And Liz was they met at Quail Hill Farm, so we've served. A number of people have been met and married there as well. So you know, we've been active in that role as well. Anyhow, so many of those apprentices carrying on the work, and that's really the really critical aspect of what we've been doing all these years.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned Mary Ryan. You want to talk about that relationship? And you know, Mary, of course, gave us a conservation easement on her property at Fireplace in East Hampton, historic property in and of itself, where signal fires, as I understand it, were set for the gardeners on Gardeners Island, and also a camp for young people. My father went to camp there in the 1920s. And soon thereafter, it was a girls' camp, and we know many people have gone there, and we still hear from them. In fact, we just received an email this past week from someone who attended the camp and was so happy that the land was protected, and really did a shout out to the Ryan family, Maxwell and his brother, and as to their stewardship of that site and that property. And there's a camp there too. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So Mary, one of the dearest people I've ever met, and she came to me in the fields at Quail Hill, and it's these sort of extra connections which you know, you sort of build a garden and people come to it if you love that garden and care for that garden. And Mary was one of the people who came, and she said the farmland at Fireplace Farm, it's an 18-acre parcel, but there's a bit of it that is farmable, was vacant. And she said, I don't like being fallow. And she asked us to come out and take a look. So I went to lunch there. That's all it took. And I said, okay, this is a long way from Quail Hill, but it's significantly warmer because it doesn't face the ocean, faces the bay. Sometimes it could be a 10-degree difference, and that would allow us to grow some crops longer in the season. And plus I loved Mary. So we took that on, and we farmed it for about 15 years. And I think Max, who's been so supportive, so helpful to us at the farm since then, Maxwell Ryan, and Oliver as well, sons of Mary, must have been young college at the time or something like that. So again, this is another 30-year relationship that just seems to get richer and deeper. And someone called me from California, and a woman who I knew here. She was working with a wonderful woman named Lisa Tansman, who had started something called Camp Erutan, and that is nature spelled backwards, Erutan. And she said, we're looking for a place on the East Coast where we can have this camp, which was meant to bring young children siblings who've been separated in the foster care process, bring them back together, sleep out in tents, experience nature backwards and forwards. And I said, well, I don't know that we have the appropriate place at Quail Hill, but there's a place where there used to be a camp out at the end of Springs Fireplace Road. And I connected Lisa and Mary, and that led to, again, another 30-year relationship with just a beautiful, beautiful project. And Lisa's kept this going all these years, and the place is perfect for it. And there's, you know, there's one camper who I think started when he was 7 years old. He's now in his mid to late 20s. His name is Luis, a wonderful guy who went off, first one in his family to go to college, came back, now has a really good job working in the city, and comes out to help set up the camp every year. He's been doing that for 25 years. And what a legacy. And then, you know, that spreads to the new people who are part of the Camp Area 10 program too. And, yeah.
Well, this really sort of speaks to, again, that our work is not only about land, it's about people. And another person who ties into Quail Hill, but also Mary Ryan primarily, and Fireplace Farm, is a dear friend of mine who is a Shinnecock who passed away, unfortunately, tragically, in the late 90s, Lamont Smith, who himself was quite interested in we have since found, in heritage seeds. But he came to me, to our office in Southampton, and again, we were classmates in high school. Actually went to Dartmouth together. He went on a scholarship, although he unfortunately never finished. But he was asking me, John, do you know a place where I might grow the Three Sisters? And I said, well, let me talk to Scott, and let's think about that. And of course, it came back around to Mary Ryan and Fireplace Farm.
Yes.
So Monty went out there, and I don't know, was he there for 2 or 3 years, maybe?
Yeah, 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you want to talk about one of your experiences, one that I unfortunately never shared, but that was the sweat lodge.
The blessing. Yes. Yeah. That's it's interesting what this kind of work where you find yourself. So to bless the garden, Lamont invited myself and a few other people and to do a sweat lodge at the reservation. And I don't think that's something that happens every day. So it was really quite an amazing honor. And it was an amazing experience. And that, you know, opened my way of thinking and being, you know, instantly being in that sweat lodge with Lamont and everyone else. And actually a few years after that, after Lamont passed away, we got involved with a project through Southampton Medical School. It was through a wonderful nutritionist, Josephine Connolly Schoonen, who got a grant to establish gardens in low-income areas in Long Island. And they needed one more garden. And I said, I think the reservation is the perfect place for something like that. And there was a little bit of seed money, and we delivered compost and worked with some people on the reservation. And so that connection has also gone on.
Yeah. Well, speaking of all of our community, of course, the Shinnecock Nation is very much a part of our community, and there is the heritage that pre-exists my ancestors by thousands of years, and we are fortunate to have them, and we look forward to, as an organization, continuing to build a stronger relationship with them. We have assisted the Shinnecock Nation with the reburial of remains that have been discovered in the last year. And that's been an honor and a privilege to find locations for them that are suitable for the reburial of their ancestors. And in this crisis that we find ourselves in now of the coronavirus and health and access to food and equity and diversity, and you know, we need to lend a helping hand to all of our residents to provide them with a supply of food. So we look forward to helping them have access to fresh local food, certainly at this time, and working with other farms and other organizations. We're doing something like that now with the Bridgehampton Child Care Center. We are very fortunate just to have received a grant. So this is a Quail Hill Farm project, really instigated by one of our farm members who said, you know, what can we do? How can we help underwrite as members of the farm food for all of our community, everyone in our community? And the Bridgehampton Child Care Center, we will be providing fresh produce, food that otherwise would have gone to restaurants primarily this year.
Right.
But due to the, you know, the coronavirus and the lack of demand that we have there, this is something that Leighton and Bonnie Cannon, the executive director, and other members of our staff have worked on. And so now we got a grant from AFDI, all for the East End. And that's a start to make this a reality.
That's terrific. Yahoo.
Yahoo.
Wonderful.
When was thinking that I want to remind everybody that there's the Q&A button at the bottom, and so if you have a question for Scott or John to you know, to ask your question, and so I was thinking maybe I might toss in a question that somebody had emailed to me earlier, if you don't mind. So John Frawley had, who I think is now on the call as well, had sent in a question that, based on your exemplary 30 years of significant contribution to the trust, what would you most like to see the trust accomplish in the next 30 years?
That's a big question.
That's a big question.
That's a big question. That's a lot of years. Interesting. I wonder if I don't remember actually trying to tackle that question 30 years ago. And I think we were obviously making a lot up, but after you've experimented for 30 years, you should probably project a little bit more with a little bit more forethought. I hope that, I mean, John's been talking about, you know, the work that the land trust will have to carry on with has so much to do with stewardship. And that's obvious because the land protection piece will have played out at a certain point. And there's a limited amount of land available on the east end of Long Island. So how do the work has to be, if it's involved with stewardship, it has to be creating new stewards and enlisting people who will be willing to care for the land in a way that, I mean, it's what we need throughout the world. It's pretty obvious, right? And that's one reason I've focused on this, on this work for all these years. And we need it more than ever. It's pretty obvious right now. At the same time, I would think, well, the land trust now having the recognition, and the farm having the recognition, the strong recognition of being such a part of this community, can use that to take on even more of a leadership role. Like we've always done that, but even more so, and to enter into collaborations with all the other people who are doing something similar. But maybe to branch out some more. I mean, I think the work is, if it's less focused on protecting parcels of land, it's going to have to be more focused on linking with people on all the other social aspects that need attention right now. So that's what I would say for the next 30 years.
I think a challenge for the land trust community is to make itself relevant to everyone in their communities. And that's certainly something that I know the Land Trust Alliance, which is essentially the service organization to all of us, is really wanting to help facilitate land trusts, really understanding the unique place that they fill in their community, and helping them really consider what they do in the community context, that it's community conservation. So the land, again, we said this earlier, is significant. It grounds us literally, but it's access to that land by everyone who lives here, whether that is by having a community garden plot somewhere, which is something that the trust has gotten into in recent years. But other organizations can do that. So facilitating others to make land available for people more broadly to grow their own produce, which, also being a clearinghouse for information for people to be able to grow. And Bridge Gardens is beginning to play that kind of a role for us with Rick Bogish, our director there, doing so much in the way right now of video clips for people to really understand how to plant things. And there's I'm sure a wide library of that kind of material that we should just help people get in touch with. I think that it's another role for us. I think is when we are in times of crisis, as we are now, looking to ways that we can build bridges among ourselves, build trust. And also problem solve. I alluded to the fact a little earlier of the problem that Quail Hill is facing in terms of selling produce that was originally intended for restaurants, which are simply not buying. Well, that's a problem for all of our growers out here who have depended on sales to restaurants as a component of their sustainability, their financial sustainability. And this includes people who are growing oysters, for example, who used to sell them in large amounts to restaurants. I mean, this is a problem right now, which is why we need to find new ways when crises present themselves, thinking outside the box to link up those producers with the people who need the food the most. And that's, again, sort of what we're trying to do with the Bridgehampton Child Care Center, but that's a model that could be replicated for other farms who are in the same boat, a win-win situation, finding a way for foundations and individuals to support farms to actually divert some of their food that they're growing to the people who need it most in our communities. So those are that's some food for thought. John Frowley, who posed that question. It looks like you got some more there, Yvette.
I do. So Sue Hilty has asked, what have you both been the most proud of? And then kind of companion with that, Carol Steinberg just emailed me a question asking maybe Scott could discuss other farms or farmers that he has nurtured, and that might, I kind of feel a little bit that those might be good companion questions.
So which first?
What was the first one again?
What have you both been most proud of?
Wow. I'll let you start.
I talked about the coming to the realization of how much the apprenticeship program really meant. So I think, ultimately, I think I've been happiest by working with the soil and building up the health of the soil. That's really what an organic farmer is meant to do. But as far as the spread of the work and how it's actually spread all around the country from Quail Hill, it's working with apprentices over all the years. Yeah.
Oh, can't hear you.
I keep unmuting myself. Maybe going on from that, maybe some of the farms or the farmers that you've worked with,
Boy, there are so many in that. Every time I see a film clip, I mean, actually, one of the things that I think has changed quite dramatically over the 30-year period when we started was connecting with farmers of all kinds, so that there was a sort of an artificial division between conventional farmers and organic farmers, and over the years that's changed significantly. And so I've had contact with most of the farming community out here, and I talked about that in the film, that to actually live in a place where some families have farmed for 350 years on the same land is a very humbling experience. And of course, we were always looked at as the new ones on the soil, new ones on the block. But the relationships that we were able to build up with so many farmers over the years has been a really rich part of the experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think there's just it's too much for me to single out something, but I guess one of the things I'm proudest of with respect to the work that we do is our focus on understanding and the goals, needs, and circumstances of people with whom we work, whether they're landowners or whether they're community members concerned about something, but understanding, starting with what people's goals, needs, and circumstances are. And if they're landowners, understanding their land as well, and trying to problem solve a way to conserve the most significant portion of their land while recognizing and respecting their need, for example, for equity out of that land, because especially for farmers, the land is their equity. And so you can't go and say to them, gee, it would be great if you would protect this. Would you give this to us? So it's not going to happen. So we find ourselves, whether it's farmland or woodland or, just the whole variety of types of land which we work in. Families are complicated, and not everyone is on the same page. So sometimes, and Deborah once said this to me. She said, you should have been a psychologist. You're really good at that. But I think that's part of the ethic and the ethos of the organization, is to problem solve and to work with people where they are. And sometimes that takes a long time. So I think the other thing I'm proud of is our patience and consistency in what we do, and our perseverance, because it may take years to accomplish some of these really big projects. Got to hang in there.
So another question from Alice Tepper Marlin, who asks about Paul Hamilton and others who started at Quail Hill have established wonderful farmers markets in each of the East End villages. So Scott, maybe you could talk a little bit about how that evolves, or the role that these markets are playing in the community.
Yeah, I think the reason, farmers markets did, start to take off in this country, it seemed like fairly late compared to the importance of farmers markets in Europe, for instance, and probably most other parts of the world. But I think that really, the slowness in that had to do with the fact that most farmers had farm stands, and that was a major part of their business, and many of them along, 27 and the road on the North Fork as well. So I think there wasn't the call for farmers markets for years. We actually helped to start the first one. I think maybe West Hampton Beach had started about the same time, but we helped start the Sag Harbor Farmers Market. I remember there were, we had 5 little tables or something like that on this little plot of grass. And that would have been, I don't know, 20 years ago or something. And people responded. So it really gave, it was, in my mind, we didn't really need to do that because we had a very active community already coming to our farm, but there were many people who didn't, who also wanted access to local, fresh, organic food. And so from that Sag Harbor one, in a couple of years, there was, the East Hampton market, and then Paul got involved with starting the Springs market. And Paul was an apprentice. Paul worked for us for 4 years in the early 90s, and he's still involved, and he's out here, and he's been incredibly actively involved in taking care of land and in farming, and in and out of Quail Hill for all those years. So another wonderful friendship. And now farmers markets are sort of part of the scene, and so many people recognize how important they are. And I don't believe they've at all taken away from farm stands. It's just that there are more people recognizing that local fresh food is a healthy alternative. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, especially now.
There's a question from Carla Ash, another longtime farm member.
Yeah.
She's saying, I'm familiar with many CSAs around the state in California, but this has been the only one I found that until recently was completely self-harvesting. Are there others?
I actually have never heard of one that operates exactly like Quail Hill. There are many CSAs that will allow people to pick flowers or to harvest peas, but I've never run into, and I've talked to lots of people, met, and when I travel, all of these years when I've traveled and spoken at conferences and been here and there, usually I'm asked to speak about that aspect of it because people can't believe it works. And when people ask, well, how is it going after all those years? And we say, oh, well, we're doing it. And this is actually what we hear from our members, and then this is still the case, is that's why we belong to this farm, because we want to be out there in the field and have our hands in the soil. And that is, in the end, is as close as you can get to educating people about the earth. So it's been an amazing thing. We basically inherited it, and we said, let's keep it going, and we've kept it going all these years. Yeah. And I just want to say to Carla, one of my most pleasurable jobs is, over all the years, hanging out at the farm stand on Saturday mornings and talking to people like Carla and hearing about her love of the Adirondacks. And, I love those stories. And I don't always, of course, I remember Carla's name, but I don't always remember everybody's name, but I remember their stories.
Yeah.
Maybe Kathy from our staff had thrown in a question about asking Scott, what was your most memorable moment with a farm member? And I guess, what does he think of membership in general as Layton takes reign? So I guess more like the future, the members and the farm.
Well, I've been amazed at what at how they're operating over there. I mean, how strange that I just happened to choose this time to leave the farm after all those years, or to graduate, as Megan says. And they're just doing a phenomenal thing. It just takes so much. The farming part of it, planting the plants and tending the soil and everything takes so much work. But actually coming up with policies of how you make this thing work with people coming out into the field, because what they heard from everyone was, we want to be there. We want this. We're really looking forward to this. So they've done it very, coordinated with the Land Trust office on this, and they've done an amazing job. And I've got reports on the first harvest days working beautifully. And yeah, so it's a wonderful crew. I know them all, and they're the right people to be there at this time. So yeah, I have too many favorite experiences with individual farm members. Name one, way too many. And we'd be here for the rest of the night.
Well, one person who I think we all miss, and who was shown in the Growing Farmers film, was John DeQuavis. We saw a glimpse of John, who is no longer with us, but one who was devoted to the farm, and riding his bicycle down and doing his harvest. And another person who really has been a tremendous supporter of the organization, Quail Hill, but also the founder of the East End Food Institute, a partner organization of ours, and just a very, very good friend, who we all miss. And of course, we've got his daughter and her family, Maggie, still very much involved and engaged. But I mean, there's just so many people who have enabled the organization and the farm and all that we do. Our farm, our incubator program on the North Fork, where we're helping new farmers get started, and just all these different aspects of essentially problem solving, helping people connect and get their hands in the ground, in the soil, so all of these things are obviously gratifying to us all, but couldn't happen without the tremendous support of the community and those who really underwrite our work.
I'm going to I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, because Michael Light had a statement rather than a question, and maybe for the end, but I think that this would be a good time. 30 years ago, Deborah Light made an epic leap of faith with John, Scott, and the Peconic Land Trust community. And it's amazing to see the magical, astonishing things that have happened since at Quail Hill and at so many other places all over both North and South Forks, due to members of the larger community having the same kind of faith and belief and commitment. Who could have ever imagined in 1990 the splendor that has emerged? Mom certainly didn't, but she believed. Happy 30th, Quail Hill. Congratulations, newly full-time poet, Scott. Oh, and happy birthday, Mom, who would have been 85 yesterday.
Wow.
3-star stuff incarnation. She is pleased.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Michael.
Wow.
Oh, that's really beautiful. I was thinking maybe we had one other thing that we wanted to share as a video piece, and then maybe a few more questions after that. And I know that Scott wanted to read a bit from his upcoming book. So I'm going to do a screen share for one thing, and I'm going to say this was put together by staffers Bridget Michelli Martinez and Haley Smith at the end of last year, as we celebrated Scott at our staff and board holiday luncheon, and a special thank you to singer-songwriter Carolyn Doctorow. So I'm going to share this now.
Lonesome highway way out west, put that old Ford country squire to the test. Drive until there's nothing left around me. Stop when I reach the desert plains they come with empty. And I'm gonna stand by the side of the road where I can see the horizon in every direction. Feel the wind and the sun in my ear. So even for a second, I'll know what it feels like to be here with you. If we ride that highway south towards the Shenandoah, winding through the Blue Ridge hills onto the Carolinas, watch a pretty red-winged blackbird fly in a pale blue southern sky, I'll know what it feels like to be here with you. Time moves fast and it waits for no one. So I'm gonna live like someone left the gate open. Yesterday's gone, tomorrow never comes. And I wanna know what it feels like to be here with you. Pulling into Charlotte now, 30 more miles to Hickory Town. Time to roll all the windows down. While the fiddler plays that old time sound, we'll step outside to touch the ground. So I'll know what it feels like to be here with you.
Well done.
Thank you.
Like,
Yeah.
Michael's comments made me think of that, because thinking of the pictures of you with Deborah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, that farming looks like work.
Yeah. Well, do you miss it?
I do miss it.
Yeah.
I have a little patch that with the Chinese herbs, that the project we started in 2003, that was always sort of my project. And it's out there on the back of the Town Lane field, and a couple days a week I'm now a volunteer, and I go out and putter around with the Chinese herbs, but I'm learning a lot about it.
That's good. That's good.
Earlier, actually, Scott, I was just talking about, so Josh Halsey had asked a question earlier about whether or not he had any suggestions of podcasts or audio books to get the juices flowing as a gardener in the field, and or other inspirations that you can suggest for people who are now still in quarantine.
Well, there's a really wonderful series. I'm sure you can go back and listen to it. I was a guest on it, and I know there were maybe 160 episodes or something. It was called Farmer to Farmer. Really well done by a guy named Chris, forgotten his last name at the moment, who sadly passed away just a couple of years ago. But Farmer to Farmer podcasts, and all the young farmers that I talked to said, boy, I just learned so much from that. So I would go with that. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. Well, we're a little after 6 o'clock, so I think unless if there's other questions people have out there. Oh, there was one, actually, a second one from Carla, just about talking about the efforts working with the local schools and to bring more apprentice opportunities to the diverse communities that we have out here. Maybe Scott, you could talk a little bit about the work that the farm has done with the spring school and the East Hampton school.
Yeah, I think we've probably worked with every single school out here over the years, and it's really, again, a really valuable part of what we've done. And I'll tell you the thing that in the last couple of years, I've gone in every year in the early spring, late winter, I think, to the middle school in East Hampton. And I was amazed when I heard this, that the 8th graders, part of their reading list is The Omnivore's Dilemma, Michael Pollan's Omnivore's Dilemma. It's an abridged version, but it's the real thing. And I've gone in every year for the past years, and then Mary Woltz, our beekeeper, has gone in, and I think maybe the other John Apple Halsey has gone in. And so it's really an amazing experience. And that's the essence of, you know, connecting with a local farming community, is carrying on something like that with young people. And that's, there's nothing more valuable than that, really. Yeah, beautiful thing. And we brought people, all those schools, to the farm. There's nothing better than that, of course, harvesting potatoes with people. And, you know, that's the favorite task is harvesting potatoes, I think. Yeah, we've done without thousands and thousands of kids. And that's the work that has to carry on.
Well, are you going to give us a snippet of your latest?
Yeah, so I thought, because I started with, you know, something from the first year, this is the very last couple paragraphs of the new book that I'm working on. And this chapter, it's the first chapter in the book, is called Inexhaustible Ways of Seeing. And I'm reflecting on the beech tree that many people who are on this will know, because it's the magnificent beech tree that sits in front of the Quail Hill Farm shop. So the shop, they're intertwined. I was going to say one envelops the other, but they're absolutely intertwined. And I didn't know this until recently, that the word beech actually is a synonym for book in many European languages. So as it turns out, I've been up there thinking about writing, and actually writing in underneath the canopy of this beech tree, which is synonymous with a book all these years. So I write about that, and this is at the very end of this chapter. Many times daily, I rub shoulders with the beech tree as I pass, going outward to our nearby fields or going inward to my desk. No longer does the ground interfere with my friendship for the whole being of this graceful living thing. In the words of the British author-adventurer Robert Macfarlane, you must imagine the ground almost as a mirror line, because a tree's subterranean root system can spread nearly as wide as its aerial crown. The Swiss psychologist Carl Jung, who explored archetypes, dreams, and poetic metaphor, wrote that life itself is like a plant that lives on its rhizome. What is above ground may last only a single season, but hidden from us beneath the soil surface, underneath the eternal flux, the rhizome endures. The starlings and grackles with their frenzied autumn music have moved on to winter in a warmer place. The spiky husks of the beech nuts are scattered on the forest floor, and the papery beech leaves that hold to the tree for so long now cover the leaves of oaks and hickories, a carbon carpet for passing white-tailed deer. Deborah Light, too, has moved on after 80 years on this earth, though she communicates still through the story of this beech tree. The particular, precise language that speaks through this tree is beyond mere knowledge or mere feeling alone, and the syntactical structure is fostered by both what is seen and unseen, bark, leaves, and nuts, a network of microbial life support beneath the soil. A few hundred years ago, with gratitude to the beech, I may have used some thin bark to serve as a tablet. I imagine I would have scratched the same words I now type, words I have learned in the surrounding fields as I have plowed and cultivated the same soil that animates this tree or set seeds into it. This landscape is crisp within earth's spin, words that begin a book. And like the noise of starlings, like earthworms, archaea, the effervescence of spring leaves, the sweet meat of beech nuts, all a part of this earthen gift, one of the earth's inexhaustible ways of seeing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you all for being here and listening.
Yes, and thank you for all your years with us. And of course, you're here.
I'm here.
You know where to find you. And you're still working on those Chinese herbs. And our friendship continues.
Well, thank you all. I really enjoyed it. I hope everybody out, who stayed with us through the last hour and quarter, has really enjoyed hearing from Scott. And I look forward to hearing more and more of your stories years go by. So thank you, and thank you everybody for listening and tuning in today. We really appreciate you spending Saturday afternoon with us.
Yeah, and be well in this this tumultuous time, and let's all work towards building bridges among ourselves, and no more division. Tolerance of each other, and we've got to do it. We've got to move on from this place. It's a pivotal moment, and there is reason for hope. So let's grasp it.
Let's embrace what Martin Luther called the fierce urgency of now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Thank you all for being with us.
Yeah.
So I wish you all a good evening, and thanks.
Thanks. Thank you all.
Farewell.
Yep. Hang in there.